what I'm going to talk about this evening really depends on how you interpret the first two images that I'm going to show. This is Oshodi Market in Lagos, Nigeria in 2007. It's a vision of people using the street in a way that is tremendously cacophonous and tremendously economically impressive. This street market is something that I always think to myself. Jorge Luis Borges had a short story called The Aleph, and the Aleph is a point in the world where absolutely everything exists. And this vision of the street market reminds me of a point in the world where absolutely everything exists. But 2 years later, this is Oshodi Market. And this was an example of a government intervention which decided that the traffic should flow freely and the people should not do what they want to do. Personally, for me, the first image is an image of economic development and an image of economic vitality and urban vitality. And this image is rather dispiriting. So let's go through some of the numbers, and this will repeat some of what Doug said. Rural to urban migration, cities are growing. This data is a couple of years old, and it may clash with some of the things Doug said, by close to 200,000 people a day and 1.4 million people a week, 70 million people a year. And that's 130 people every minute or two every second. And what that has meant is that, and this is a photograph of Rocinha, one of the largest favelas in Rio de Janeiro, that there's about 1 billion people living as squatters in the world because there's no ability to handle the kind of urban growth that's coming, not from private developers and not from governments. And if current trends continue, that will rise to 2 billion and then to 3 billion squatters. And even with the reduced population growth that Doug mentioned, that'll be 1/3 of the people on the planet living as urban squatters. And we know what we need to do. We need to build housing. And we need to build a lot of housing. And if you do the math, we need to build a house a minute, a house a second, I should say. And like I said, there's no private or public entity that's going to be building houses at that rate. So the people do it themselves. They use ingenious strategies. And so this is Süleyman Akaya in Sultanbeyli on the outskirts of Istanbul. And his father took advantage of a piece of Turkish common law that dates back to the Ottoman Empire that says that if you get a house built overnight and it's substantially habitable, you can't be thrown out without due process of law. Squatters use quick-drying concrete, and they play this hide-and-go-seek with the authorities, and they eventually build their homes and get in, and then it's an eviction battle, which governments don't love to take on. At the same time, there's another piece of ingenuity that the squatters have used, which is that if you succeed in doing this, and enough of your neighbors succeed, and you have 2,000 people in the community, you can apply to the government to be officially recognized as a sub-municipality. And what that means is that you can have an elected government even though no one there owns the land. And that's what's happened in Sultanbeyli. So across the street from Süleyman, this is what his community looks like. The squatter government that's popularly elected has begun a planning process and designed roads and allowed for larger scale construction and brought in infrastructure. So the squatters have creatively used the tools that are out there in the law to create an urban structure that's beginning to work for them. 300,000 people live in Sultanbeyli. The other strategy is to steal. This is a view from the Estrada da Gávea in Rocinha in Rio de Janeiro, and people are stealing electricity. Proudhon said property is robbery. Andre Gors said robbery is poetry, so I suppose this is poetic. The point of this is that what can people do when they're stealing electricity? Well, what they can do is they can build a little hut, like is in this photo there, and that is a pump. And what they can do with the pump is steal water. They pump the water up the hill into that little device where the plastic pipe leads up to it on the roof of a house is a water tank, and it's gravity fed the same way that actually many apartment buildings are where I come from in New York City. Big tanks on the roof. So people develop the possibility of having infrastructure by stealing it. I don't think in the 21st century that anyone should have to be without water or electricity, so I actually think that this kind of theft is a good thing. At the same time, there's economic opportunity that goes on, completely under the radar and not talking with the government about it. Now, this is Balogun Market in Lagos, Nigeria, and this is the fabric market, but there are huge markets all over the city of Lagos. Most of the businesses there are unlicensed, unregistered, don't necessarily pay taxes, and that's the dominant economy. In Lagos, 80% of the people work in the informal economy off the books, or what I call System D. This is an increasing phenomenon in the world. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has estimated that half the workers of the world are working off the books. And that will rise very soon to two-thirds of the working people on Earth. So there's something about the formal economy and the way that the formal economy functions that's leaving out more than half the people who actually want to work in the world. And this is a really significant thing that we have to address and we have to think about in terms of how cities develop. Now, let's see. What I'm talking about is not something that's real new, because this is talking about London in 1675. It had a population of 350,000, 18,000 peddlers and hawkers, 5% of the population. So this kind of economy has been around forever. It's actually bigger now than it was in 1675. And it accounts for a tremendous amount of value, $10 trillion or 6.4 trillion pounds in the average year. And that means that if it were its own political structure, if it was a nation, it would be, I'm calling it the USSR or Bazaristan, but it would be the second largest economy in the world. In other words, it would be an economic superpower to rival the United States and China. All of this underground economic activity. And what we're talking about here is not drugs or prostitution or human slavery or guns. What we're talking about here is legal product just dealt with in this completely quasi-legal way. This is the way the world is developing. This is a McKinsey estimate that over the next 15 years, cities and emerging economies will create half of the world's economic growth. So that if we want to think about this, and we want to think about cities growing in the world, we have to think about squatters, and we have to think about System D, or the informal economy, what emerges from the bottom. And that's why I say, okay, squatter communities are growing faster than legal areas, the informal economy is growing faster than the formal economy, or as I put it, rationality is now irrational, and what we have to do is get used to it, because this is the way cities are going to be. So I've been sitting around looking for some principles about how we could start approaching this future urbanism, and I'll just leave you with four. One is from Nietzsche, that basically money is unequal depending on whose hands it's in. The poor person needs his money much more than the rich or lazy person needs it. The second is from Keynes, that the biggest problems that we're facing, and this remains true today, 75 years after he wrote his great work, are economic disparities and the lack of jobs. And the philosopher of science, Paul Feyerabend, who said that facts come from negotiation between different parties, basically meaning if you call people squatters, you're defining them in a certain way. You could also call them homesteaders and define them in a completely different way. So we have to talk about what our words are and what they imply about what the facts are on the ground. And I think there also has to be some engagement with a kind of alternative economic thinking, because the market, as we've defined it, is having some problems in working for the people. And I sum this up with a phrase from Allen Ginsberg, who said, "When can I go into the supermarket and buy what I need with my good looks?" So what I'm looking at for cities of the future is basically to engage all of these entrepreneurial activities that are coming from below, because I think they are the places that are going to determine, they are the activities that are going to determine the future of the world's cities. Thank you.